A legend leaves, a new era begins, and the sport moves on like nothing happened. But this week, two separate headlines landed that don't quite fit that tidy storyline. Helmut Marko is coming back, not to Red Bull, not as a team boss, but as ambassador for the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring. Second, the FIA has confirmed it's already discussing tweaks to the 2026 regulations, specifically around energy management, after just 3 races of the new era. On their own, these stories look routine. A familiar face gets a ceremonial role, and regulators do what regulators do. Together, they suggest something more interesting. F1 is trying to stabilize the optics of a transition, while the technical foundation of that transition is still being negotiated in real time. Let's break it down step by step. What Marko's return actually signals, what the FIA is really saying about 2026, and why Austria 2026 could become a surprisingly important moment in this whole storyline. Helmut Marko hasn't just been around Formula One. For decades, he's been one of the sport's most consequential insiders. First as a driver, but far more significantly as Red Bull's longtime advisor, a central figure through 2 distinct championship dynasties. The Sebastian Vettel era, the Max Verstappen era. Marko wasn't the public face like Horner, and he wasn't the engineer like Newey. But he was often the strategic pressure point, involved in driver decisions, talent pipelines, internal direction, and the hard calls that define winning teams. And that's why his departure at the end of 2025 mattered. He confirmed late last year that he would not continue with Red Bull into 2026, closing the book on a long-standing role in Milton Keynes just as F1 moved into a brand new regulation set. So this new role, Austrian Grand Prix ambassador, reported by OE24, matters less for what it gives Marko and more for what it gives F1. A controlled, ceremonial way to bring a powerful personality back into the paddock without reopening the power dynamics inside a team. An ambassador role is typically reserved for recognizable figures with credibility, often former drivers, sometimes former team bosses. The sport already has templates. Jenson Button as an ambassador for Aston Martin, and Damon Hill in a similar role with Williams. Guenther Steiner now attached to the Miami Grand Prix as ambassador. These positions are not just photo ops, they're part PR, part stakeholder management, human symbols of continuity. Because Marko's return isn't happening in a calm moment. It's happening as the 2026 era is already showing early stress. If you were choosing a place for Marko's first official F1 role since leaving Red Bull, you couldn't script a better location than Spielberg. The Austrian Grand Prix is held at the Red Bull Ring, and it's been a regular fixture since returning in 2014. It's also produced a specific kind of F1 memory, the kind where title contenders collide, decisions get punished instantly, and small mistakes cascade into major consequences. And here's another crucial detail. F1 has already locked this event in long term, confirmed until at least 2041. That commitment matters. It signals that Austria isn't just another stop. It's a strategic anchor point for the sport, commercially and culturally. The 2026 Austrian Grand Prix is scheduled for June 28th, and it's the 8th round of the season. Round 8 is a strange moment in a regulation year. It's far enough in that early patterns are clear. What works, what doesn't, which teams guessed right. But it's early enough that the sport still has time to intervene if something is off. And right now, something appears off. The FIA has confirmed that discussions are underway to refine the 2026 technical and sporting regulations following the first 3 races of the season. On paper, they're presenting this as normal. Their statement frames it as part of the natural evolution of the rules. Technical data gathered, stakeholders consulted, process followed. They emphasize constructive dialogue, and insist the meeting was pre-planned rather than reactive. They say it was agreed earlier in the year that a sequence of meetings would take place after the first 3 races, timed so that sufficient data could be gathered. That's the public posture. We're not panicking. This is routine governance. But then comes the actual substance, the part that gives away why this is happening. There was a commitment to making tweaks in the area of energy management. In modern F1, energy management isn't a small footnote. It's not like adjusting track limits or clarifying a procedural rule. How drivers deploy power, how cars defend and overtake, whether a lap is driven flat out or managed, whether races look aggressive or constrained, and the 2026 power unit balance, especially deployment versus harvesting, has been under scrutiny from the start. If the balance is wrong, you can get a kind of racing that technically contains overtakes but strategically feels restrictive. Drivers saving, lifting, and timing usage like they're negotiating with the car rather than racing it. The FIA also claims the events to date have provided exciting racing, which reads like reassurance, but also like a clue. When an organization says something is exciting while simultaneously scheduling accelerated meetings to change a foundational element, you're watching a careful messaging strategy. Not necessarily dishonesty, more like risk management. April 15th, Sporting Regulations Meeting, focusing on potential changes to Section B to support technical adjustments. April 16th, further technical session, follow-ups and new topics. April 20th, high-level summit with all stakeholders, aiming for preferred options and consensus. Final approval still goes through the World Motorsport Council process, but the structure tells us something. They want decisions quickly. And that's the quiet story inside the official story. If the first 3 races exposed patterns that could harm the product, especially around energy deployment, then the longer the sport waits, the more those patterns harden into the season's identity. Admit enough to fix the issue, without admitting so much that the 2026 concept looks flawed. That's a narrow corridor. Now we circle back. Why does Marko's return matter in the same news cycle? Because Helmut Marko isn't an engineer, and he isn't the FIA. But he represents something F1 always needs during technical turmoil: a trusted interpreter of the sport's power structures. His public presence at Austria 2026 will do 3 things, whether intended or not. It reconnects Red Bull's home race to Red Bull's legacy identity, even if Marko is no longer part of the team. It gives the paddock a familiar reference point, while 2026 is still being tuned. It provides the sport with a stabilizing symbol, someone associated with dominance, decisiveness, and the last era of clear competitive order. And that might be exactly why an ambassador role is so useful. It's influence without authority, access without responsibility. By the time F1 arrives in Spielberg on June 28, 2026, 2 things will be tested at once. First, whether the FIA's fast-tracked meetings produced tweaks that actually improve racing, especially the balance between harvesting and deployment. Whether the sport can maintain the illusion of a seamless new era while its technical blueprint is still being adjusted. Helmut Marko will likely walk the paddock as an ambassador, official, visible, and symbolically back. But the more interesting question isn't whether Marko returns. When a sport has to refine its new rules after 3 races and bring back its old power figures for continuity, are we watching a confident evolution or an early correction to a future that arrived slightly unfinished? Because Austria won't just be a home race. It may become the moment we find out whether 2026 is a new foundation or a moving target.